Good afternoon, Trump's family. Welcome back to my channel. Have a good day and God bless you. Let's get into the news. What a great victory for Lauren Boebert. Yesterday, defeating Nancy Pelosi back to Rhino out there in Colorado. If you guys remember, we're following this story last month, talking about how they were using this Democrat PAC that was going to work to try to take her down, take Lauren Boebert down. They have some salacious material about her, some slanderous stuff about her to hope to deter the voters from Colorado not to send her back to Congress. Brian, no Democrats being backed up by people who are close to Pelosi. And of course, the Rhino Republicans in Congress, they wanted to make sure she didn't return to Congress, because they had already gotten rid of Madison Condor. If you guys remember, during his primary, using the same kind of tactics by leaking this type of material, they made up a bunch of false allegations about Lauren Boebert, and she actually fought back. Well, last night was the primaries out in Colorado and had some victories all across the nation, who were people who were backed by President Trump. And Lauren Boebert, be one of those individuals, took advantage of it and beat her opponent handily. I mean, she had over 60% of the vote in her primary over the Rhino, who was being backed by a Democrat PAC, and Rhino's people who want to take these America First came to this down. Unfortunately for the Democrats, they were unable to do a Pelosi minions were unable to unseat Laura Boebert. And so that means this gun-toting patriot is going back to D.C. to be able to continue to fight for the people in her own district in the state of Colorado by ensuring that they are a firewall of the Marxist communist style type of things that this current regime has been pushing. So what a fantastic victory. I look forward to more victories on the horizon as we continue to keep our eyes out. Our girl Marjorie Taylor Greene won hers recently. Of course, Lauren Barbara won hers, and we're waiting on the Arizona ones now as they get ready to go into their primaries. So it's very, very exciting to things that are currently happening. So another huge victory. Of course, this sham hearing that they've been doing with the January 6th stuff is not going to help Democrats, because the American people are focused on things that matter, things like your pocketbook, things like gas, things like food, and inflation. That's what the American populace is focused on. Not these phony hearings in this faux outrage that is currently going on anyway. Let me know if you live in the Colorado area and you voted for Laura Boebert in your general in your primary. Let me know in the comments down below. Let's get positive energy. We've got some good news for President Trump. And we've got some more craziness from the J6ers. And we've got other just massive TDs and crazy things happening all around. And as craziest things are in the United States, let's count our blessings. Let's be grateful. Even though our country is slipping away, we do still have a lot of freedoms, even though we're about to face massive food shortages, and inflation is through the roof. There are people that have it way worse than we do. Does not to say that we don't fight for our first world standard of living as the Marxists and these treasonous traitors, rat bastards, are working with an idea of the least common denominator. They try to make us all poor, instead of lifting us all up. On what I'm talking about is what's happening over in India and China, where roughly a quarter of the world, 25% of the world, is currently right now at risk. Because of these once-in-a-century floods, 70% of this demographic is living across South and East Asia. And a new assessment published says that 25%, about 1.8 billion of the global population, which is just under 8 billion right now, is that significant risk of exposures to floods with a depth of 6 inches or more. 395 million are living in China, 390 million are living in India. And these flood exposures make their impoverished situation even worse and dire. Please remember our brothers and sisters in India and China in your prayers. The Chinese people are our brothers and sisters. They are the worst victims of the tyranny of the CCP. And I can't wait until our brothers and sisters in China can taste the sweet taste of freedom. Remember, in Hong Kong, there were flying Trump flags and American flags because we were / the world standard for freedom. And that is why Join his handlers can't stand it, are trying to erode it. Important SCOTUS update right now. At the top of this episode, the Supreme Court announced Wednesday that Associate Justice Stephen Breyer 83 will retire today or tomorrow depending when this goes up. But let's just consider it today, Thursday, later today. After the court issues its final decisions for the 2021-2022 session. Bryan was forced to announce his retirement in January of this year after a pressure campaign by progressives and the leak of his private decision to retire that he was not yet ready to announce. Breyer was nominated to the court in 1994 by President Bill Clinton. And the fun starts because in the next round, we get the completely inadequate, not justice material, put in there to fill a quota. Judge Ketanji Jackson 51. She'll be sworn in at the same time that Breyer retires. She's there because Joey promised and nominate a woman based on her color and her biological gender, not because of her talent or skills. She was confirmed by the Senate back on April 7, pretty much along party lines, with Mitt Romney thrown in there to kind of throw things off. The court has announced that tomorrow beginning at 10 a.m., it will hand down all remaining opinions during this term. Accordingly, my retire from active service under the provisions will be effective on Thursday, January 30, 2022. At noon, this is a letter to Joe Biden from Stephen Breyer. Then the Supreme Court issued a statement announcing that they were having a simple swearing-in ceremony for the not ready for primetime. Kunitachi. Brown Jackson. Okay, let me show you. If you go over to Fox News, you will see tail of the tape media claims SCOT justices lied about Roe v. Wade during your confirmation doesn't hold up on review. Fox News was slow to report, quote, Secret Service's January 6 committee didn't reach out before Hutchinson testimony. But then, here is the latest update from them. 6:40 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Former White House aide Cassidy Hutchinson stands by all the testimony she provided to January 6 committee. They were late to report the news, and I'll give you the details of it in a second about the Secret Service. I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. The January 6 committee did reach out to them after getting Hutchinson's testimony to verify her testimony because they wanted to row their testimony. Even if it was false. It isn't even testimony. It's hearsay. It's literally third hand. It's a bad game of telephone. And then their most recent at the time, I'm looking at this, their most recent update. The last update was former White House aide Cassidy Hutchinson stands by all the testimony she provided. No articles, no headlines about the debunking of the President Trump throwing food at the wall lunging for the except for that they didn't verify that with the let's say that they let's count the lunging at the steering wheel as something that they did tackle, but nothing about the note. Nothing. Fox News is bought and sold. They are at this point the definition of controlled opposition. So let me give you the details on what happened with the Secret Service. The Secret Service communication chief stated on Wednesday, the agency was not asked to corroborate Cassidy Hutchinson's Tuesday testimony before the January 6 committee, where she claimed with second-hand knowledge that President Trump had tried to commandeer the beast after his rally that day. We were not asked to reappear before the committee in response to yesterday's new information, and we plan on formally responding on the record. Anthony Emily Guglielmi, wrote in an email to Politico, we have and will continue to make any member of the Secret Service available. And of course, as we reported here, Bobby Engel and Trump's Secret Serviceman on duty on that day will testify under oath to contradict Cut. Jensen's story. Now we know this whole thing is a sham. It's not really a bipartisan committee. There was no Republicans asking questions. There was no cross-examination. It was all scripted. We covered that link ad nauseum. I'm not going to go into it anymore. It's fair to point out that Fox News is a wholly unreliable source for conservative news. They did not update the debunking that we had last night. 24 hours ago I reported on the debate debunking, and earlier in the morning I ended up bunking. It wasn't till the end of the news day. The business date almost 4 o'clock. That Fox News corrected part of the record. Boy, how far Fox News has fallen. But we're not Fox News around here, folks. Okay. The J6 committee has set their eyes based on the false testimony of Hutchinson. They are rolling with that and trying to roll over the next person. So the House January 6, on Select Committee issued a subpoena to former Trump White House counsel Pat Cipollone. On Wednesday, whatever it happened to client attorney privilege, it doesn't exist if you're Trump or a Trump associate or in the Trump sphere. The move came after Committee Vice Chair Representative Liz Cheney called for Cipollone testimony, citing the testimony of former Trump White House staffer Cassidy Hutchinson as the reason for this. I kid you not. This is what she tweeted out. As we heard yesterday, White House counsel Pat Cipollone had significant concerns regarding Trump's activities. It's time for Mr. Cipollone to testify on the record. Any concerns he has about the institutional interests of his prior office are outweighed by the need for his testimony. That's right, Liz Cheney said, as we heard yesterday. And who do we hear from yesterday? We only heard from Miss Hutchinson. So based on Miss Hutchinson's discredited hearsay, Live Liz Cheney put that out. That is the reason why White House counsel Pat Cipollone is being subpoenaed. Wow. The committee subpoenaed Cipollone. Quote, "The Select Committee has subpoenaed former White House counsel Pasquale Pat Cipollone for deposition testimony as part of the committee's investigation into the January 6 attack on the U.S. Capitol." Here's their press release. Chairman Benny Thompson and Vice Chair Liz Cheney today announced that the Select Committee has subpoenaed yada yada yada. The chairman and vice chair released the following statement. The Select Committee's investigation has revealed evidence, and Mr. Cipollone repeatedly raised legal and other concerns about President Trump's activities on January 6 and are the days that preceded. While the Select Committee appreciates Mr. Cipollone earlier informal engagement with our investigation, the committee needs to hear from him on the record, as other former White House counsel have done in other congressional investigations. And it concerns Mr. Cipollone has about the institutional progress of the office he previously held are clearly outweighed by the need of his testimony. Or in other words, we are so desperate to get something on the record and continue something to distract the people going into the midterms that we want Mrs. Maloney so we can continue this failing circus and keep the attention on January 6, and not on the failures of the current regime. And guess what? No one cares about January 6 testimony. It's only newsworthy because she lied so badly. Pat Cipollone probably being an attorney, if he did show up for it, it's probably going to be less interesting. Your just plead the fifth or whatever is not probably going to have the spin that Cassidy Hutchinson gave us. At least there was some entertainment value in that. In the month of May, a New York judge agreed to lift the civil contempt charges against President Trump. If he paid $110,000 in fines, which of course is nothing to President Trump, but the principle of it sucks. Okay, that he wouldn't have to do this. Well, on Wednesday the judge ruled that Trump is no longer in contempt, after failing to turn over the subpoena documents in New York Attorney General Letitia James' witch hunt probe. So President Trump is now done with that business. Let's turn over to CBS News, who reported the following New York judge ruled Wednesday that Donald Trump is no longer contempt for further turnover documents demand in a subpoena by the state's attorney general. The former president's April 25 contempt finding came after he contested a December subpoena seeking records related to his personal finances and the financing of several properties. Trump claimed he had no material that was responsive to the subpoena, leading to demands by the judge in the office of New York Attorney General Letitia James, and his attorneys provide detailed explanations of how they conducted their search. Quote, "Although we are pleased that the court has looked at the contempt findings, we maintain that it was wholly unwarranted and improper in the first place. That came from Alina Habba, an attorney for Trump. She said in a text message, we will push ahead with our appeal to secure justice for our client. So they're done with the contempt. But Trump's people aren't done yet. They want justice. So if you recall, this happened when New York Judge Arthur Engoron said that President Trump was in contempt, and he ordered a fine of $10,000 per day. Because he refused to turn over documents because he said, we have no documents. If you subpoena me for something, and I don't have it or it doesn't exist. So there you have it. One less headache for President Trump. But there are still a few other legal things his lawyers are doing to wrap this all up. Maria Bartiromo on Wednesday had Minority Whip Representative Steve Scalise, the man who survived an actual terrorist attack from Bernie Bro. But of course we don't talk about that, because we're still worried about January 6, and a whole bunch of protesters who didn't actually shoot at a sitting member of Congress, like the leftist Bernie Bro guy did. But of course, that's water under the bridge. Now, this is what Steve Scalise said. First, Maria Berto asked him, I find it really odd that we're not talking about having pregnancy termination clinics on federal land, and we can't drill on federal lands. And this is what Steve Scalise responded. Yeah, it's just nuts. I mean, It shows you how out of touch the American people, how out of touch with the American people the Biden administration is, that are more focused on taxpayer-funded pregnancy exterminations. Then there are lower costs for oil, for natural gas, for basic energy, and we see it driving up everything else when you're at the grocery store. You're paying for this Biden agenda. That's Steve Scalise on the plan being pushed by Elizabeth Warren and being entertained apparently by the Biden White House, to put tents and other facilities on federal lands in red states to provide the service that many states are having sugar laws or are going to also overturn Roe v. Wade in their respective states. Thanks for being here, folks. Big hug. Ciao.